Marcus, 48 and newly divorced, purchases a corner townhouse in Willowbrook Estates, a gated community of 847 homes priced between $800,000 and $2.3 million. The neighborhood shows manicured landscaping, the hum of leaf blowers, and status cues such as German cars and private school schedules. The deciding feature is a 3-car garage, needed because he inherited his Uncle Raymond's 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB. Though weathered, the car is a numbers-matching classic with decades of maintenance records. He stores it under a gray tarp while researching restoration options. Within days, he meets Diane Blackwell, the HOA president. She cites community standards and hands him an unofficial violation notice about the covered vehicle. Marcus studies the covenants and highlights provisions. He finds no specific ban on covered vehicles within a 30-day window, and notes written notice requirements before violation proceedings. The reading suggests a compliance test rather than a documented breach. A neighborhood text chain circulates implying the newcomer treats rules as optional. Social interactions cool. Conversations pause at the mailbox and greetings fade. The conflict appears along 2 tracks. Written procedures and image expectations enforced through informal pressure. The covered Ferrari becomes the object at the center of this contrast, setting stakes for how standards are asserted and rules apply. An emergency HOA board meeting is noticed with 48 hours lead time and hosted at Diane Blackwell's house rather than neutral space. 4 board members sit behind her kitchen island, with a single chair facing them for Marcus. Diane cites multiple complaints, presenting ring screenshots, printed neighbor emails, and a quick property value poll to frame community risk. Marcus produces the covenants he has highlighted and cross-referenced. He points to Section 427 permitting covered vehicles for up to 30 days, and Section 6.1.3 requiring written notice before violation proceedings. He asks for the specific clause allegedly breached and for the prior notice mandated by procedure. Janet suggests tabling the matter pending legal review. The session, designed as an intimidation setting, pauses without a finding. The next morning, Marcus finds dog waste on his lawn and an anonymous note reading, "Trashy car for trashy people." He reads this as a social tactic, not a procedural step. Later, he hears Diane reference aesthetic consistency while showing a home, linking image enforcement to sales narratives. The confrontation clarifies 2 themes: reliance on documentation and process to evaluate alleged violations, and deployment of informal pressure through social signaling. The kitchen meeting becomes the first entry in a timeline showing how procedure and presentation diverge. After the table discussion, Diane escalates using informal mechanisms. A neighborhood text chain implies Marcus believes rules do not apply, and he is not invited to a safety meeting where identical flyers appear across the block. A petition to clarify vehicle standards gathers 23 signatures by noon. Marcus notes signals, garage doors closing as he passes, conversations ending when he approaches, greetings replaced by silence. He hears Diane's showing day pitch about unfortunate new additions affecting the overall aesthetic, reinforcing that image narratives influence market positioning. He concludes the dispute tracks both compliance language and real estate incentives. To document events, he installs a security system with cloud backup and motion alerts. That step anticipates future claims and creates verifiable records. The campaign therefore moves beyond written notices into social pressure, calibrated to isolate a resident and shape perception. By contrast, the covenants and procedures remain the reference for legitimate enforcement. This contrast, culture versus code, structures the next phases. Informal influence attempts to produce outcomes without formal votes, while petitions and meetings build momentum toward later proceedings. Marcus's strategy shifts from reactive responses to evidence-first monitoring, comparing subsequent demands against governing documents, timelines, and notice requirements. The groundwork is laid for testing claims with records rather than impressions. Documentation will anchor every evaluation. Diane introduces her brother-in-law, Brandon Kowalski, described as an attorney, to deliver a demand at Marcus's mailbox. Remove the cover within 72 hours or face legal action. Marcus emphasizes a central principle. Actual HOA authority requires proper board authorization and counsel of record. He researches Brandon's practice, finding a focus on DUI defense and discount real estate closings, weak reviews, and no mandate to represent the association. Marcus contacts the HOA attorney listed in his purchase documents. The attorney confirms Brandon has no standing. He then returns to Diane's door with Maria Gonzalez, recognized counsel on speaker, and raises unauthorized practice concerns. During that exchange, he notices foreclosure notices on Diane's counter, context indicating financial strain but not altering procedural analysis. The result is a shift from intimidation toward verification of authority and process. The sequence underscores a method. Verify representatives, request board resolutions, confirm the firm actually engaged by the association. By applying due diligence rather than reacting to tone, Marcus neutralizes a threat premised on appearance. This mailbox episode becomes another entry in the record, linking claims to documentary requirements. It prepares the ground for assessing subsequent notices, meetings, and votes through the same lens. Who is authorized, what the covenants permit, and whether procedures have been followed. Going forward. With the mailbox threat discredited, Diane concentrates on neighborhood organizing. A watch meeting proceeds without Marcus, and identical flyers appear in doorways captured by his cameras. A petition drive accelerates under the banner of clarifying standards. Spouses and neighbors tie property values to undefined vehicle expectations during casual conversations. Doors close as Marcus walks by, reinforcing isolation as a tactic. Diane schedules another informal chat and brings Brandon again for legal theater despite his lack of authority. Marcus has documented the deficiency and raised it with Maria Gonzalez. The pattern shows soft power tools repurposed to build apparent consensus before any compliant vote. The documentary lens remains on records, dates, lists, attendee names, copies of flyers, and the language used in texts and petitions. These items show how influence campaigns can precede procedural steps, shaping perceptions before bylaws are invoked. The groundwork for formal action is visible. An anticipated meeting, revised language, and pressure to reclassify temporary covers as violations. This section prepares the transition where informal theater crosses into formal overreach. It highlights why contemporaneous documentation matters, when claims later rely on attendance counts, signature totals, and asserted community sentiment. The setup leads directly to an emergency meeting with notice defects and a proposed amendment aimed at retroactively reframing the covered vehicle. An emergency meeting is noticed with only 24 hours. Lead time, although bylaws require 72. Diane reserves the community center and fills the room with proxies and non-resident participants. She presents a vehicle amendment requiring all vehicles to remain visible and identifiable at all times. With $50 daily fines effective immediately, she claims 67% attendance and proceeds to a vote. The tally is 23 in favor and 8 opposed, after which she announces that fines will accrue and towing may be authorized. Marcus requests the vote tally and an attendee verification list for eligibility confirmation. Later cross-checks show approximately 34% legitimate residents present, 11 voters not living in Willowbrook, and 3 relatives using old addresses. The episode documents 3 issues: insufficient notice, eligibility defects, and retroactive targeting of a previously permitted temporary cover. From a process standpoint, the meeting represents a high watermark for using procedure to reframe ongoing conduct as immediate noncompliance. The evidentiary focus remains on lists, proxies, notice timestamps, and the amendment's effective immediately clause. This material positions subsequent steps: compiling evidence packets, contacting oversight authorities, and preserving records for review. The amendment's passage, presented as decisive, becomes the clearest example of formal overreach dependent on irregular attendance and defective notice. After the emergency meeting, Marcus compiles an evidence packet summarizing notice defects, illegitimate proxies, and a harassment timeline. He contacts Channel 7's Angela Torres, who covers HOA abuse stories but holds back while reviewing Uncle Raymond's papers. A folder labeled Willowbrook Development 1987 contains Meridian Holdings, LLC documents showing incorporation in 1985 and acquisition of 847 acres for development in 1987. Uncle Raymond held a 67% stake. The project used a ground lease structure under which homeowners purchased houses but leased the land through 47-year agreements. Monthly HOA payments bundled lease obligations remitted to Meridian. As heir, Marcus receives those flows. Bank records reflect $127,000 per month deposited for 18 months, totaling over $2.3 million. Legally, HOA actions cannot override landowner rights established by the leases, and documented harassment may implicate lease violations. The discovery reframes the dispute. Diane's pressure targeted the landowner whose company underlies the community's footprint, streets, and common areas. Maria Gonzalez's role becomes central to operationalizing remedies under lease terms. The file transitions the case from defense against fines to asserting owner rights grounded in recorded instruments. This section maintains the evidentiary focus: corporate filings, payment records, and the interest. It prepares the next step, where findings are executed through coordinated legal, financial, and communication strategies. Marcus convenes a strategy session at his kitchen table with 4 contributors. Maria Gonzalez, Estate and Land Counsel, outlines lease termination remedies for harassment and expedited options under contractual terms. Neighbor Jake Morrison, a retired Fairfax County detective, presents a pattern log with timestamps, witnesses, and photographs documenting escalating conduct. Forensic accountant Sarah Chen reviews HOA finances and flags systematic irregularities totaling $94,000 over 2 years, including kickbacks, inflated fees, and fake consulting. Classic car appraiser Tommy Reeves confirms the Ferrari's numbers-matching pedigree and estimates value around $2.1 million at auction based on authentication and records. The group adopts a 4-phase plan: reveal the car at the next harassment incident, present financial evidence to the board, disclose ownership and the ground lease framework at a community meeting, and engage media if resistance persists. They expand camera coverage and add redundant backups to preserve chain of custody for recordings. Throughout, the emphasis remains on verifiable documents and clear sequencing so each step stands independently. The plan converts discovery into controlled execution while minimizing escalation. It also ensures the audience of residents understands not only conclusions, but the sources supporting them. This section remains grounded in roles, evidence types, and ordered actions, forming the bridge between the development file and public presentation. Clearly, at 5:47 a.m. Tuesday, a tow truck reverses into Marcus's driveway under Diane's direction. Neighbors emerge and cameras record the scene. The operator holds a generic work order signed by Diane citing an abandoned vehicle creating a hazard. Marcus removes the gray cover, revealing the restored 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB in Rosso Corsa with chrome wire wheels. Audible reactions follow, and the operator declines to touch a multi-million-dollar car. Diane repeats that rules apply to everyone, but the crowd's response shifts. Marcus then discloses that she is attempting to tow her landlord's car. He presents Meridian Holdings documents, explaining the ground lease framework and his ownership interest under the neighborhood's homes and common areas. Neighbors begin reviewing records on their phones. Social momentum turns and the towing effort collapses. The incident reframes the conflict in public view. The covered car was not junk and the enforcement target was the landowner. This moment validates the planned sequence, placing documented facts before an assembled audience and undercutting narrative claims unsupported by procedure. It also sets the stage for the next meeting, where financial irregularities and prior notice defects will be presented with exhibits for resident review and board action. Records, not impressions, will guide evaluation during subsequent discussions and any remedial steps for residents. That evening, Diane posts another emergency meeting notice with agenda items aimed at removing fraudulent residents and pursuing action against disruptive elements. She presents slides alleging deceptive behavior, while Brandon asserts fraudulent property claims. Marcus and Maria attend with a prepared document set. When Diane moves toward a vote, Marcus introduces Sarah Chen's findings showing $94,000 in embezzlement patterns, fake consulting, inflated contracts, and kickback arrangements involving HOA funds connected to Meridian lease flows. Maria identifies herself and distributes certified ownership and lease documents, confirming the ground lease structure and authority boundaries. Residents examine deeds and payment terms they had not closely reviewed. Janet calls a no-confidence motion, and the board votes to remove Diane. Craig abstains. Channel 7 records the aftermath outside, signaling accountability. The meeting becomes the convergence point where process, finance, and ownership documentation confront narrative claims. The result is a governance consequence based on verifiable records rather than informal pressure. This section remains confined to the events described: the notice, the slides, the counter-evidence, the motion, and the recorded vote. Residents note the vote records 51 in favor, with Craig abstaining. The outcome shows how eligibility, documentation, and financial review replaced impression-based arguments. Next steps include organizing leadership, preserving exhibits, and preparing restitution measures. In the aftermath, the community schedules emergency elections, plans reimbursement for stolen funds, and acknowledges media coverage that triggered licensing scrutiny of Diane's real estate activities. Sarah Martinez, a trusted kindergarten teacher, becomes HOA president, and neighbor Jake Morrison assumes a security liaison role. Marcus addresses residents from a neutral podium, emphasizing lessons about assumptions and process. He announces the Raymond Chen Memorial Fund seeded with approximately $2.3 million in accumulated ground lease funds to provide $50,000 annually in scholarships, with the first recipient being Jake's granddaughter at Virginia Tech. He also proposes a community improvement fund supporting playground upgrades, an organic garden for food bank donations, and an annual classic car show benefiting local charities. The board adopts financial transparency measures including monthly reports, open books, and independent auditing. This phase replaces personalized enforcement with process-driven governance and directs attention toward measurable community benefit. The initiatives are presented as programmatic responses tied to documented funds and assets, rather than rhetoric. The section remains within the provided outcomes, detailing leadership changes, restitution plans, transparency standards, and program creation consistent with the earlier findings and the ownership structure. Residents receive timelines for reporting and audit publication, and committees form to oversee scholarships, garden operations, and logistics. Documentation standards continue, ensuring records support decisions and reforms remain transparent. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates appears on the cover of Virginia Living as a model HOA, with property values reported up 12% and resident satisfaction elevated. The Ferrari functions as a charity draw. Tommy's later appraisal places its value near $2.4 million. Marcus's family life steadies, and he and Sarah Martinez begin dating. His relationships with his teenagers improve. Diane relocates to North Carolina, and occasional anonymous donations arrive for the scholarship fund. Channel 7's series earns a regional Emmy, and other communities request consultation on governance issues. Maria's firm expands ground lease and property rights work. Jake launches security consulting. Sarah Chen grows an HOA auditing practice. Community traditions take root. Garden harvest for the food bank, monthly transparent meetings, and an annual car show supporting charities. The final emphasis is practical. Read covenants, verify authority, and document everything. Check ownership history, including possible ground leases. Use evidence-based process rather than rumor or pressure. These points summarize how the dispute, grounded in noticed effects and assumptions, was redirected toward transparent governance and community benefit without dramatization beyond the recorded events. Residents report clearer budgeting and access to records while committees publish minutes. The approach scales. Decisions reference documents first, then discussion. The narrative closes by highlighting repeatable steps validated across initiatives.